Welcome to week 72 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We watched another Barnaby Jones this evening, and Ty Henderson, Sam Williams, was in it. That's funny that we've seen him in two things this week. Mm-hmm. We watched episode 347 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Monday, December 9th, 1985. So I would have been home from school my first day, and would have been excited to be able to see a Santa Barbara episode. Unfortunately, it's been a long shift, so Pearl sends Amy home. Brick is there. That's literally all that happens. There's two scenes with Amy. One at Buzz's and one on the couch with Brick. Probably have to get this Sophia and Lionel storyline moved along so they're both back in town before the trial. I guess they'll want Augusta to be there. So, and Lionel, so... Mm-hmm. Mason somehow talks Gina into signing custody of Brandon over to him. I just didn't really see where the turn was. So it seemed like there was no reason for Gina to cave, really, to me, because she could have just tried to contest the pill use. But Mason did say, when I was rereading the summary, he did say, "I'll bring your whole history out in court." And so that's really the only extra thing he said. So I suspect maybe she didn't want Brandon to hear that and would rather, risk giving him up than for whatever her whole history is to come out.
Yeah, to me, the whole thing seemed a bit convoluted because Mason has actually become Brandon's guardian, but he's given Brandon over to Santana. And Gina's agreed to this. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it honestly struck me as being a bit unlikely. And I wasn't quite sure what Mason's angle was with it, actually, because I believe Cece had actually disinherited Brandon. Mm-hmm. So gaining guardianship over Brandon would not be really another way to get at Cece's fortune.
Was that in the will, though, that was destroyed? Or was that before? Yeah. Removals were in the missing documents. Mm-hmm. So technically Brandon's trust fund is still there, I believe. Which is probably why he wants control over it. Mm-hmm. So Santana's pretty happy. They talked about Brandon being there over Christmas and, being able to tell Brandon that Rosa would still be making his meals for him. Mm-hmm. And they actually leave it to Gina to break it to Brandon. And she comes up once again on the fly with the story that her doctor says she needs to rest a bit. And so to help, Santana's agreed to take Brandon for a while. But Brandon really does not want to leave Gina. So which is good to see.
And there's a whole bunch of little things in this episode around that I sort of wondered, they had Gina go up and help him pack, and then of course she tries to make off with Brandon, and
that's right,
and
they catch her walking out,
and all of these things, and it just seems kind of obvious to me that you wouldn't do that if you didn't really trust her, and just. Yeah,
she tells things. Brandon, we're going to go on a secret trip, okay? No one can know. And then Santana walks in as they're going out the door. Just where do you think you're going? And Brandon goes, we're going on a secret trip! She needs to explain secret a little better to him. And Mom had on the same dress as Eden that night. Kirk gives Eden a pearl necklace that he bought for her when they were in Hawaii, which freaks Eden out a little bit. But he says he knew the whole time that, he was in love with her. He keeps trying to kiss her, as you can imagine, as they're on their honeymoon. And when he brings in a violinist, she freaks out and says she needs to be at home with her family until Sophia's safe.
The show does kind of a neat thing at this point, too. It has the music morphing into the theme of Cruise in Eden, but then it kind of gets all distorted. Mm-hmm. It becomes like horror music, and that gives us a really good indication of how Eden is feeling at this moment. Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting for me to see Kirk Cranston in these early days at his least disturbing.
Well, you get hints of a certain amount of disturbing even in this form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just a roller coaster that goes this way for the rest of the show. Hiram Claggett, cool name. He shows up with his helicopter to take Mason and Warren back to look for Sophia and Lionel. Ted, of course, wants to come too, but Mason ends up leaving him at home to watch, be able to go out with the gang. And Eden shows up at this point and really seems to be old friends with Hiram Claggett.
Yeah, and she is very relieved by Mason's actions in this. So we actually get a scene where they're all working together.
Hiram says he's been up and down this part of the coast for 50 years, so he knows things that the other searchers might not, which it turns out he does, because he knows about that cabin and goes to check on it. Unfortunately, the roof has collapsed on Sophia and Lionel by the time they get there. We hear the helicopter arriving, and we hear Mason on the megaphone calling to Lionel and Sophia, but they seem to be sitting there covered in dirt. Now, you said an interesting thing. You thought it wasn't Judith McConnell and Nicholas Coster playing Lionel and Sophia in that final scene with them covered in the debris, which is interesting because it was definitely them in the one scene earlier as the roof collapsed in because they had dialogue. And I had actually seen something online just in the last couple of weeks where someone else had mentioned a scene of Sophia and Lionel together being played by doubles, and I think this was it. So that's interesting. I didn't really notice that. I wonder if it maybe just because they were all covered in debris, whether it looked like it wasn't them, or it was considered a stunt because there was too much dangerous debris covering them that could get in your eyes. So maybe they had stunt people portraying them in the debris for some reason.
Or another possibility might be that they had some kind of last-minute rewrite or something and changed that scene a little bit, and perhaps the main actors had already been dismissed or something like that.
Maybe they shot it the next day and just inserted it in the previous episode or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked, the other thing I kind of liked about this whole part of the episode was, Ted is just absolutely disgusted that he has to stay home, and he says something like, "Oh, great, so I have to babysit Gina," which is such a different attitude from him than he had, if you think back to the tunnel caving in and him being very concerned about Gina.
Yeah, that's right. They were really close at that point. This is probably his first day off. Likes a little bit, even though, for all we know, it's the day after Halloween. I'm not quite sure what day it is in Santa Barbara time, but it's December 9th. So, and then after that evening, Kirk go back to their honeymoon hotel. Don't know if it's the Capwell Hotel. It doesn't look like any Capwell suite we've seen before. It looks a little like Kirk's apartment with some furniture moved, but. Kirk ends up tucking Eden into bed and, I guess, sleeping out on the couch.
The world's saddest honeymoon after the world's saddest wedding.
Up in Santa Rosa, Kelly has brought blankets and pizza for Dylan. But she didn't get any drinks. This is actually maybe a very clever thing on the writers. I think when the writers realized that they could kill two birds with one stone here, because the plane is stocked with champagne. And guess what? Sometime after the second bottle, they have sex.
And someone in the writer's room or in the production is obviously really shipping this Dylan and Kelly love story, because this whole scene is shot in slow motion.
That's right. I had blocked that out.
And I think we heard Corey Hart at some point too. But
oh, was that today?
I
know we heard Corey Hart recently, and it was probably no, it was a different song today. But yeah, I think we heard Corey Hart last time with Dylan and Kelly. I think.
Yeah.
So slow motion and drunken sex in the plane, and I'd forgotten it was in the plane. And then the next time we see afterwards, Kelly's really upset with herself, and she wonders how she can face Nick again. So at least that's a positive attitude to have. Dylan suggests he could just leave town and she can forget about him. So this sounds like a great idea. We can get rid of Dylan. Kelly can forget this ever happened, unless she's pregnant. One thing they did talk about while they were drinking champagne was Dylan asked Kelly if she flew, which is kind of funny since we already know Eden, Cece, and Sophia are all pilots. So she said, no, I just never thought about it. So maybe someday Kelly will be a pilot too. So we have probably some heart-wrenching conversation in Santa Rosa to look forward to in this upcoming episode. And then, of course, we'll see what Kelly tells Nick about. I mean, Nick will be able to tell, right? I mean, he was able to tell before that they seemed unnaturally drawn to each other, I think, and he was trying to just blunder through it, but I think he'll be able to tell something happened.
So this is a really exciting time in the story for people who love the Kelly-Dylan romance. It's painful for those of us who are not as into Dylan.
Yeah, and for those who thought that Kelly and Nick were a great couple, and were hoping that would go forward, which I know I was in 1985, although looking back now and seeing it 35 years later, I can see there was some problems with that relationship from the beginning that may not have made it the lifelong love story that I thought it might be back in 1985. That is it for the Monday episode. So we've got a little surprise coming up in the first few minutes of the Tuesday episode, which we are about to watch. And then we will do our podcast probably tomorrow after dinner. But we will see you after we watch episode 348. See you then.
Bye-bye.
It really is getting hot in here.
It must be the champagne.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode number 348, originally aired Tuesday, December 10th, 1985. Well, did you hear the most horrifying word on the history of Santa Barbara in this episode?
I didn't hear a particular word. Everything between Kelly and Dylan right now is a bit horrifying. But
Play the end of this scene.
Every time Nick trusts me, or that I try to do him a favor, Nick turns out the loser.
Look, Dills, it wasn't just you.
I will let you open the envelope with the single most horrifying word in the history of Santa Barbara.
that's a receipt for Dills.
Look, Dills, it wasn't just you.
I didn't even notice her calling him that the second time around.
What's that sound? It's me screaming back in 1985 and reverberating through space and time. She just started calling the other guy Nicky. So I guess she figured she needed a nickname for Dills as well. Nick is coming to San Francisco. So they discuss Dylan getting out of town before Nick can make it there. How was Santa Rosa, says Nick as he barges onto the plane. He must have gotten up very early, they say, to get to San Francisco so early. He ends up strong-arming them both into a hotel, and Dylan had been trying to leave town, and he makes them have breakfast all together, and Dylan's constantly trying to leave. Kelly's very uncomfortable with the whole thing. Nick doesn't really notice that Kelly's on edge, but senses that Dylan is acting too antsy. And he finally says, "What did you two do last night?" Thinking that they went out partying or something. Anyway, they don't really answer that question. And Nick goes to the publisher. He's been thinking, of course, that the publisher, had blown him off because he got a message from the publisher saying that he'd left town and that the secretary just had an envelope for him. And he thought it was going to be a rejection letter, but it turned out to be a check for $8,000 in an advance on the book. Not even an advance, what is it called? Retainer or something. So anyway, Kelly and Nick are excited about that check, and Nick asks Kelly to marry him. Thoughts on what she'll say?
Not really.
Do you think Kelly is over Nick? I mean, over Dylan? Do you think Kelly is over Dylan?
I'm not really invested in this triangle at all, so...
You'll be happy when it's over.
Yeah.
All right. We'll just coast for a while. The only thing about this story I can remember from this point on is the last scene Kelly and Dylan share together. So the next few months, I can't remember anything else that happens to any of these characters. Janice, Dylan, Nick, Kelly. No idea. So, which is funny because I probably saw every episode between now and the end of April. So, anyway, it gets exciting right at the end. Mason and Warren and Hiram Claggett burst into the cabin to rescue Lionel and Sophia. Lionel comes to, finally, after Warren shakes him for a while, and Sophia eventually regains consciousness and gives Lionel a very close hug, possibly even a kiss, and Mason and Warren exchange glances.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then for the rest of the episode, Mason's constantly needling Sophia about what exactly happened with her and Lionel. Even though it's none of his goddamn business.
No. But I think they can both see the potential for a lot of problems in both households if they have actually rekindled their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Cece wants her there, right? And Mason's aware of that, so I don't see why Mason would really be too annoyed if Sophia and Lionel took up.
Well, I don't think Mason would. In fact, it would probably be in his interest, but it's not something that Ted or Kelly or Eden would want to really see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a few episodes ago, Sophia was ready to leave, and that would certainly keep her there, which Ted and Kelly would probably be pretty happy about, but I don't think they necessarily want to see her rekindling this relationship with Lionel, which has caused so much friction and, arguably did contribute to Cece's stroke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And certainly Augusta's not going to be happy with it, and that'll be more turbulence in their household if that starts up again too.
This may actually be an interesting thing because Ted and Eden kind of forgive Sophia in this episode, but then maybe when they find out she's taking up with Lionel again, they will backpedal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's 5 a.m. and Eden is writing a letter to Cruz, outlining everything. Kirk, once again shirtless, sneaks up behind her and tries kissing her again. At the Capwell house, Ted tells Sophia they don't want her to go back to Rome. Eden and Kirk arrive, and Eden hugs Sophia. And then Sophia says that she heard Eden got married, or Ted congratulates Eden, or something. Anyway, Sophia gets wind that Eden's married, congratulates her, and says, "Oh, where's Cruz? I want to congratulate him." And then he says, "Mama, I married Kirk." Sophia then tells her that Eden's done exactly what she did with Cece.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually an interesting parallel. She said, "Eventually I did come to love Cece and still do, but I didn't love him when I married him."
Yeah, I thought that was actually really interesting that, she's saying that Cruz is basically the love of Eden's life, and she's basically saying that Lionel was, when she was married to CC, the love of her life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That could add actually a little fuel to the fire on the Capwell side if she does take up with Lionel again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, with Cece not being interested in her, and possibly, I guess, to being banished from the house when Lionel finds out what she did to Brick, I can see it being a logical pairing. Jack, Kirk says, Jack always said, if you want to know what a woman will be like in 30 years, just look at her mother. So we have a very, hackneyed phrase, but we got Jack Lee invoked again, so I guess we'll take it. I wonder how long they will keep referencing Jack Lee. Lionel comes home. He asks immediately where Mom is, and Augusta says that Minx is upstairs. But we do not see her in this episode, unfortunately. And then, of course, her mind starts to wander to, did you sleep with Sophia by any chance while you were up there for 2 days and 2 nights? And then he says, first, maybe if you stop asking me that question, I'll answer it someday. But she keeps needling him, and eventually he says, nothing sexual happened between me and Sophia. And then they get a call from Sophia, and he decides that Sophia needs him because she sounds bad. And he races over there, and Augusta follows and says, if you ring that doorbell, I am leaving you.
I actually had some sympathy for Augusta in this episode because, she's been worrying about Lionel this whole time, and they've been kind of following the story on the news. And as soon as he gets home, he wants to run over and check on Sophia. So,
Yep. Yeah, I think Lionel was really pushing it with Sophia needs me this time around. I mean,
yeah,
they had literally just spent those 2 days together, and she was back with her family. There's really no need for him to go running over there. The role of Gina Capwell is now being played by Robin Matson. And her hair looks a lot bigger than even Linda Gibney's biggest hairdo.
Yeah, it's a different hairdo, actually. It's more of, it was sort of almost a blunt cut page boy style that was big in the 80s, and it wasn't the big feathered poof that a lot of people were wearing, including Mary. We do see Mary in this episode with new feathered hair. So.
Yeah, that's right. What did you think of Robin Matson? First of all, were you shocked this was Linda Gibney's? That was her last episode yesterday, or I guess you knew it was coming soon.
Yeah, I was though. I thought it would. I thought her last episode would maybe end. I guess more on a break where maybe she would be. Maybe the character would, go and take some time or something to try and figure out a way to get back Brandon or something like that. That I thought there might be a plot point which would see her character leave for a few weeks.
Maybe she just told them, I want to leave, but, I'll stick it out till you find someone. So
that's possible.
Once they cast Robin Matson, they picked the date based on that.
Yeah.
So we see Gina coming down the stairs. She tries to sneak out. Ted appears to be asleep in the chair, but he says, I'm not asleep. Where are you going? To see your dealer? And, of course, she tells him she's not a drug addict. Gina tells Mary that Mason took Brandon from her. Gina tells Mary that Mason took Brandon from her and gave him to Santana. Mary then tells Mason that what she did to Gina was unforgivable. But Mason says, well, you haven't heard the whole story. That Gina's back on pills and Santana is Brandon's real mother. So this secret that everyone's been keeping has just been blurted out to basically a stranger to the family. So, and then she asks if Brandon knows, which is an important thing, I guess. And then Mason wants to play her the tape, but she doesn't want to hear it. So he shows her the label from the prescription bottle instead. And she says, these aren't addictive pills. These are something completely different. And if she'd been taking them with all the martinis I've seen her drinking, she wouldn't be able to walk. So she says, I don't think Gina deserves to lose Brandon over a drug habit she doesn't even have. And
I found this whole thing a bit curious because, first of all, she's completely just believes everything Gina says. And then Mason explains it to her, and suddenly she's like, oh, I didn't realize about Santana. I didn't realize she might be, back on drugs. And then Mason offers to play her the tape where she confesses to being back on drugs. She won't listen to that. And then as soon as she sees the label, she concludes that he's lying about her being back on drugs. Although Gina has apparently confessed on tape.
Mm-hmm.
And she's completely 180 degrees against Brandon being given to Santana, who she's just learned is actually his natural mother, and he was ripped away from her. So I'm not getting a lot of consistency or empathy from Mary this episode. She's being weird and judgmental the entire episode, and very gullible too, because you were asking me, I didn't have a chance to answer what my impression was of the new Gina. And to me, she's a much sharper edged Gina, much more aggressive, which is maybe, more suitable for the direction the character is going in, but not one who would necessarily elicit, I think, automatically the kind of sympathy that the first Gina would get. So I sort of feel like only someone as gullible as Mary would just take her story at face value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you just said is interesting. Like, I don't think people will feel sorry for this Gina.
No.
I don't think Ted's ever going to feel sorry for this iteration of Gina. And she's pretty much, unless new characters come in, I think she's going to be basically enemy of the Capwells, the way they've cast her,
Yeah. She's kind of, I think in some ways she really embodies the Gina storyline, and coming from like a hardscrabble youth and clawing her way up. I sort of almost see her like a Leona Hemsley kind of clawing her way up and fighting for her turf kind of Gina.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they introduce some new things to the character that sort of match with the way they've recast.
Mm-hmm.
So Mason, of course, wonders why Gina admitted to that, and we see him then later listening to the tape again. And we hear where Gina made the edit. We hear that the word Brandon suddenly gets cut off. But something I didn't notice and didn't even think about, but which should have been obvious, is that Mason notices that the sound of Cece's respirators suddenly vanishes at that point, and he realizes she's taped over a fake confession over top of the original one.
So actually, ironically, we've got two of our most devious and manipulative characters, Mason and Kirk, both wondering what actually happened to Cece.
Mm-hmm.
And almost kind of heading in the same direction. Obviously, Mason will be much more zeroed in on Gina, but wouldn't it be interesting if they worked together and solved the problem? I doubt if that'll happen. But
yeah, I really don't know who's going to figure out what. I mean, it's not like there's any... I don't think Mason can strong-arm Gina into giving the truth. So, and that is it for this episode. We'll have to try and keep any Kellen Dillon scenes mercifully short for you from now on.
I just kind of zone out whenever Dillon's around, so I guess that will make it a bit more difficult to comment on the triangle.
All right, we'll be back after we've watched the Wednesday episode, number 349. We'll see you then.
Bye.
I may not cry as easily as she does, or fall prey to natural disasters.
Eden, I don't like this.
I don't think she's in any great danger, Kirk. I left my rubber hose at home today.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 349 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Wednesday, December 11th, 1985. Brick, who is, of course, hanging out at Amy's work, as usual, buzzes, gets a positive call from the DA's office. So he is hoping that something good might happen. And then he gets a call to come and see Mix. Lionel rings the Capwell doorbell, and Augusta says that if he goes in, she will leave him. He goes in and finds Sophia sad at the fountain. He asks, "What's your family done to you now?" But she tells Lionel she's sad because it's the day Channing was born, and he would have been 26 today. They talk about their shared son a bit, and then she tells him that if he really wants to preserve his marriage with Augusta, that maybe they shouldn't see each other.
I thought it was so funny too, because we'd been talking in the last podcast about, it didn't really seem like he needed to be with Sophia, and when he does ring the doorbell, Rose is kind of like, "Oh yeah, I think she's around here somewhere." Like, she clearly didn't really need his extra support. So
yeah. Well, next thing we see, Augusta has packed a bag, and she's about to leave, and Minx says that if she leaves, she'll have her arrested. So, oops, we get their first glimpse that Minx knows something about what's going on. It's good to finally see Minx again. Brick arrives, and as we expect from, what's happened so far in this episode, Minx reveals that she's had an investigator working on Brick's case for months, and she has found the Swiss bank employee who helped Augusta set up the account in Brick's name. And Brick isn't quite as angry as you'd think with Augusta. He is pretty unhappy that they've messed up his chances of getting a job. But he actually says to Minx, Augusta wouldn't have done this if you hadn't goaded her into it by giving me all that stuff.
yeah.
So it's a really interesting and kind of low-key response to, the vindication. You'd think he'd go at Augusta a little more.
I think he honestly already has such a low opinion of Augusta and he'd already figured out that she had been the one who'd probably done it, that it just really confirms what he already thought about her. Whereas, the fact that Minx is still holding out and telling him anything, I think is probably more frustrating for him at this point.
He doesn't even try to get the info from her. He makes an offhand comment about it, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Lionel arrives home, and Augusta tells him their marriage is over, and they go back and forth. Augusta says, "Oh, you think you and Sophia are like some kind of Tristan and Isolde, and you're going to be together in the next life." So Lionel starts talking about leaving, and Minx says, "Oh no, you're not the one who's leaving. Augusta's the one who's leaving." And then she reveals to Lionel that Augusta had, in fact, framed Brick for the missing money. And Augusta Lionel seems surprised by that, even though Brick and Amy had tried to tell him that on a previous occasion. And even Julia had hinted at it.
And I think, I really feel that Lionel, came back to the house knowing Augusta was going to be mad, even knowing she would be packing bags, because as she herself says in this episode, this sort of thing is part of their marriage, her leaving. But I think, especially given the conversation he had with Sophia, that he would have tried to find a way to get her to stay or to talk her into it. He probably would have come up with some sort of argument. But when he hears what she's done to Brick, I think he, as we talked about leading up to this, that it really shatters his faith in her.
Now, Brick had already left by this point, so Lionel didn't get a chance to apologize to Brick. So I assume we'll see that at some point. Augusta goes on the defensive, says she's put up with a lot from Minx over these years while Lionel was gone, including a monkey that I don't remember if it was referenced before, that made her life a living hell. So she says, and she'll die before she gives Lionel a divorce. So she's planning to try to keep him from being able to just go after Sophia the way he wants to. And then she picks up 2 vases on the way out and says, "I always forget which one is the fake," and drops them both. And Minx is distraught at her 2 vases being destroyed. Yeah, so I don't know how actively Lionel will pursue Sophia or if he'll try to get Augusta back. Kirk gives Eden a fur coat. It's not something they'd do nowadays, I wouldn't think.
No.
That coat's probably worthless now. Tony Patterson has 2 officers sent to Kirk's apartment to pick up Eden for questioning, since Cruz didn't do it. At the interrogation room, it's Kirk and Tony and Eden and Cruz in the room, and Eden ends up shooing Tony and Kirk out. Of course, Tony doesn't want to leave, and she says, "Hey, I'm already answering your questions without a lawyer. You know, I could easily call one." So Tony thinks, oh, well, let's get her statement then. And Cruz starts typing angrily without her even talking, and she, I guess, tries talking a little bit about it, and she has brought the letter with her, but I guess doesn't really, the tone isn't really right to either give it to him or talk about it. So what Cruz ends up typing up is that Eden left the party at 8:30. And at 9:30, and got to Kirk's at 9:45 and stayed there all night. And he says, "Go ahead and sign it and get out of here." Of course, when Kirk sees how short the statement is, he says, "You guys were in there for an awfully long time for such a short statement." And he ends up badgering Eden for the rest of the day. So what exactly did you and Cruz talk about in there?
Yeah, so I had a couple of thoughts on this whole scene. The first one is that Eden is, by this point, so kind of creeped out by Kirk that she actually jumps at the chance to go to the DA's office. So I was really noticed how eager she was to go, and she seemed a little disappointed when Kirk actually insisted on going with her. So I don't think this is going to be a very happy relationship between the two of them. I also have to say that Cruz is probably the single most worst interrogator ever. He doesn't even listen to Eden's story. He could have learned something potentially from this, but just, bangs away on the typewriter and gives her the thing to sign. So that was, I thought really an indication of how far down his police work is going. And the other thing is I was actually really glad that the letter came up again, and we actually do see an attempt by Eden to give the letter to Cruz, and then she actually gets cut off by a felon being brought in, and she doesn't have the opportunity to give him the letter. But in the last episode, when Marcy Walker, we see her writing the letter, I was actually reminded of something that was mentioned on the cruise, which is just how hard it is as an actor in a soap opera when you're learning new lines each day to actually remember those lines. And I think it was Lane Davies saying that every soap opera set will have scripts hidden behind pillows and under tables and that. And it was also mentioned on the cruise, I think it was by Judith McConnell, that one of Marcy Walker's ways of remembering her lines was to write them out. So I was almost half wondering when she was doing the letter writing if she was actually also writing out some of her lines, or if that might have actually been a script she had in front of her.
Well, Kirk and Cruz end up briefly in the interrogation room, or in Cruz's office together, and Cruz grabs him by the lapels and says, I know you had something to do with this, and I'm going to be watching you. And Kirk doesn't actually know what he's talking about, and later mentions it to Eden. He thinks I've done something, but he doesn't, I guess, realize that Cruz is fingering him as the person who pulled the plug, which of course he wouldn't, because he didn't, And eventually Eden just says to him, well, Cruz didn't say anything, which is basically true. So the only reason it seemed like a long time, I think, is because there were several commercial breaks, because it really wasn't that long.
No, it wasn't really.
And of course, then Kirk tries to kiss her again. Cruz tells Pearl that he thinks that Kirk pulled the plug and convinced Eden that she did it somehow. So he calls Pearl to hide a bug in Eden's apartment.
Which will
Kirk's
also
apartment.
be inadmissible in court.
Yeah, he's got the bug. He's got the bug on his table, and he calls Pearl over. So I guess we'll be seeing more of that scene in the next episode. As Sophia goes to visit Channing's grave. Now, I'm trying to remember last year. At this time, what was going on with Sophia? She was probably still Dominic. So, but we see this surprise me minx watching from the trees. And then I was thinking about it today, and I think, the secret of Channing's parentage just came out in the last year. So this is the first year Minx would really have an excuse to openly visit her grandson's grave. Maybe she's been doing it secretly all these years before. But I guess she doesn't want to run into Sophia, because you remember she does hate Sophia a lot. Brick tells Amy the charges were dropped. I really like the Brick and Amy scenes for once today. Amy's pepped up. She had something exciting to do because she has thrown a surprise party for Brick. She has Pearl bring out a birthday cake, and hopefully it wasn't made in the same deep fryer that the fish is fried, but I don't know, Buzz made that cake. Amy gives him a money clip, and Minx's new chauffeur arrives with a gift for Brick. Now, it kind of has a similar look to her very first chauffeur. So, I don't know if it's the same actor or not. Brick mutters under his breath, glad I'm not doing that job anymore. And it's a monogrammed briefcase, BW. And it also includes a note of apology. So she apologizes for, I guess, everything. He seems fine with getting a gift like that from Minx. He just doesn't want, her interfering with his life anymore.
Now, I was then left pondering whether this means that Brick and Channing Jr. had the same birthday.
I guess so. If they were on the same day. It's interesting. No Lockridges were invited to that birthday party.
No.
So. That's it for episode 349. We will be back after we watch episode 350. We'll see if Minx and Sophia run into each other at the cemetery. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
We could use you in the circus.
Mom, they were both out cold at first.
Well, when they warmed up.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We left you on a cliffhanger. We were talking about birthdays, and Diane noted that Brick's birthday is the same as Channing's birthday. And I had gotten to thinking there's probably at least 24 characters on the show. By all rights, we should be seeing about 2 people celebrating their birthdays every month.
Yes, so then I got to wondering if that was in any way significant. And as you say, it could just be that that's just how it happened. That's how, the plots just worked out. But it did occur to me that maybe this could be like a classic baby switch story. Maybe Minx didn't want her grandchild to grow up as a Capwell and didn't want Sophia to raise it, so maybe she switched out Sophia's baby when it was born, and maybe that baby was raised by a nice circus family and some other kid was brought in to be Sophia's baby.
I will note your theory, and we'll find out if you're right or if something else is going on.
It could be something
by the
else.
end of the year, sometime in the next 13 episodes.
Oh, wow.
All will be revealed. We watched episode 350 of Santa Barbara, 350, which originally aired Thursday, December 12th, 1985. Another episode I would have seen live originally way back then. Nick, Kelly, and Dylan are flying back in the jet. Nick is just, so happy-go-lucky because everything's right with the world. He's trying to get Kelly to help him convince Dylan to stay in Santa Barbara. And, of course, the whole time, Dylan and Kelly are constantly having flashbacks to their night of passion together.
And so are we having to relive it as well.
Mm-hmm. They were already in slow motion, so they couldn't really slow them down anymore for the flashbacks. Then Dylan spots some derelict oil rigs, and suddenly I had a flash, and I remembered a storyline that I had buried deep into my subconscious. So that actually got me a bit excited, because it's actually an idea that I myself had had many years ago, and I was shocked to see them actually do this on a show. But we'll find out about that in a couple of minutes. Right now, they are still flying over oil rigs, and Dylan thinks perhaps they might be good for something. Cruz and Pearl break into Kirk's apartment, because Kirk and Eden are at a hotel. And Cruz plants more than one bug, while Pearl makes jokes. He picks up a bunch of things in Kirk's apartment, and makes a comment and puts them down. At one point, he picks up some ladies' lingerie and says, "Must be Eden's. Can't picture the Kirk wearing it."
I just feel like this is an abuse of police power.
Well, you can't. You're allowed to have your friends ride along with you as you're, investigating things. Have them pick the locks for you.
I mean, the whole first, 6 months or whatever of the series, we were lamenting Mason's runaway power as assistant district attorney, and it's really seeming to me like Cruz is not actually that much better.
Yeah, I mean, he's really... it's interesting that he's gone all in on, bringing Pearl in on this, because it's super illegal. He must know that Pearl is not going to try to turn him in for a buck, even though we've seen several times Pearl try to get some money out of things, and we'll see it a little bit later in this episode. So, I don't know, but Pearl just seems like he just seems like a good guy to me, just from watching him. And I'd forgotten how likable Pearl was.
He's actually coming across better than a lot of our more established characters at this point, I would say.
Yeah, he's going along with dodgy things and trying to eke some money out here and there, but, he's also gainfully employed and just seems to have like a, all-around good nature, which is really, really nice. The thing that struck me is at one point, I think he picks up Kirk's bathrobe that we had seen before, and you had mentioned at the time, oh, that looks like a lady's bathrobe.
I thought it did seem quite feminine.
And today, when Pearl picks up the lingerie and says, "Can't picture the Kirk wearing it. Not yet, anyway." And once again, I thought, did the writers already have in their head what they were going to do to Kirk next year? So it'll be something that you have to look forward to. But that's a couple of interesting things that I wouldn't have obviously picked up on originally. But I'm wondering if they're just laying some little Easter eggs for people from the 21st century who have YouTube and are able to find these episodes. You, of course, have no idea. You can't possibly imagine what's going to happen to Kirk next year. You'll be as shocked as everyone was.
But I am starting to feel like my little theory about a very standard baby switching storyline around Brick's heritage is not actually maybe as way off or as completely nuts as I was thinking it was.
Well, I think you may have heard on the cruise people talking about the way out storylines of Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And really, as soaps go, so far they've been pretty tame. But I think maybe next year they really decide to try and run with things. Because ratings-wise, they're still at the bottom of the barrel, where they will be for the next 9 years.
Now, wouldn't this be around the same timeline? Actually, it's probably a bit before, when we had that famous storyline with Alexis on Dynasty, and she'd been accused of murder or something, and it turned out to be a senator in drag who actually dressed as Alexis, who actually did the killing. So
Played by Paul Burke.
Played by Paul Burke.
Used to be our C.C. Capwell.
Yeah.
I think this is around that time, 85.
Yeah.
Pearl ends the day by saying, "Hey, are you going to put a bug in the bedroom too?" Kirk says to Eden, "I guess the honeymoon's over," when he hears her ordering a bellhop to come up and get their bags. She says before they go home, they talk about where they're going to live, actually. And she says, "I want to go home." He goes, "Where is home?" And she says, "Well, unless you want to move into the mansion." "No, thanks. Then we'll move into your apartment." So Eden says she wants to swing by the mansion so she can tell Kelly. "Before anyone else does," says Kirk. Kelly finds it awfully hard to believe that Eden's happy. And Eden has to have that same talk her into it conversation she's had several times with her family members. "Yes, of course I'm happy. Yes, of course I love Kirk." And then, of course, they all say, "But of course you really love Cruz." Eden, while she's there, takes the opportunity to ask Sophia if she slept with Lionel. That's a brief conversation, but of course, Sophia's already a bit annoyed that the brief happiness her children have had for her has suddenly been sullied all over again. Dylan runs into Sam, who is at the Orient Express, sitting next to the pianist, singing As Time Goes By.
Yes, and who knew Sam had such a lovely voice? It was actually really nice to see that part of his character.
Of the two singers we heard today, I prefer Sam.
Yeah.
I was thinking Dylan was going to say play it again, Sam, at some point. Dylan suddenly has a flash and realizes what he can use the oil rigs for. A casino outside the 12-mile limit. Now, I had this idea when I was a kid of using old oil rigs for casinos. So, and both Diana and I thought this reminded us of Mr. Lucky, because he had a riverboat casino that was legally allowed to be a casino on the water. I think they have that, or did have that in the South, where as long as you're on a river, you weren't bound by the land laws. So anyway, this is actually exciting because I remember just always loved the idea of casinos as a kid.
And actually, if they're planning to perpetrate the sort of triangle with Kelly and Dylan and Nick, this provides actually a lot of opportunities, because then Dylan will still be around. But he won't be entirely around, so there's a lot of opportunity, perhaps, for he and Kelly to have little rendezvous away from home. Also, again, depending on where they're kind of going with it, him being a casino owner on an oil rig, that's going to be much more kind of exciting than boring old Nick. So that's going to...
That's true.
If they're kind of going for more of that contrast.
It does fit in with this slightly shady character, too.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's going to be a case of, let's put on a show, and it'll be, Nick, you're going to work at the casino as my bouncer, and Kelly, you're going to be a waitress, and let's get Amy and Brick in, too, since Brick's not working, and Amy has waitress experience. So I wonder if we'll have half the cast out there running the casino.
Living on an old oil rig, possibly, because I think on Mr. Lucky, they actually lived on the ship, too.
And then Mason will figure out a way to steal it from them.
And
JR
actually,
style.
This could be, if they're trying to bump their ratings, a really good venue for bringing on special guest stars and having glamorous clothes and little musical reviews.
Yeah, because, he's clearly going to have entertainment there. So, the next thing you know, you see them hiring Pearl to take them out there to take a look at it. And Pearl gets wind of the fact that this could be a moneymaker and says, I'll take you out there as long as you cut me in as a partner. And simultaneously, Dylan and Sam say, no! Because I was actually getting a bit excited when he said that. Because during this scene, Pearl and Sam had really good chemistry. And I thought, I'd love to see scenes with Pearl and Sam in them in the future. Much more than I want to see Dylan again. So maybe hopefully the writers and producers pick up on that.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll find a way to incorporate Pearl into that somehow.
Because they talked about having, a business shuttling people out to the boat, right? I think Dylan says, what do people love? Gambling and sailing. Well, how about a sail out to a gambling place?
Yeah.
Cruz is listening to the bug. At one point, he kicks Pearl out of the car because Kirk and Eden have come home, and I guess Cruz doesn't want Pearl to hear everything. Kirk keeps complimenting Eden's beauty, and Eden actually is not as down on the whole marriage thing as she has been every time we've seen her before. So, from Cruz's standpoint, just listening to the bug, it sounds like she's more or less happy being married to Kirk. Eden says Cruz is acting weird, and Kirk says that Cruz must realize that he can't come after Kirk because he'd be coming after Eden at the same time. Mm-hmm. And Eden thinks that Cruz is beyond caring about that because he's hurt. And Kirk says, well, Cruz has been doing so much covering up that if he acts on anything, he's going to lose his job. And Eden says that, well, he gave up his job once before for me. And he said, yeah, for you, but this time he won't get you, so he'd be doing it for nothing. And we see Cruz in the car going, oh my God, what am I doing, really? He realizes that Kirk is 100% right about everything he said.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope this leads him to a more pragmatic path, although he's already kind of mucked things up so much, really.
I wonder what Cruz could really hear case-wise. I mean, maybe the whole idea of this plot was just to get Cruz to agonize over Eden, and it's actually not going to help advance the case. But, I mean, the only thing he's going to hear is, as Pearl said, Eden admitting to pulling the plug. And, even if Kirk had done it, he's not going to say it while he's in the room with Eden. So, are they hoping he'll have like a soliloquy where he confesses to the walls that he actually did it? Because that's not going to happen.
No. With Gina it would, because she's always talking to herself.
The old Gina. I don't know if the new one will.
Yeah, we don't know about the new one. But, I think... and I also wonder, too, if Kirk, he's very suspicious of Cruz. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe suspects Cruz of trying to bug them or trying to spy on them in some way. I don't think, if he finds the bug at some point, I don't think he'll be terribly surprised.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Augusta meets Julia at the Orient Express. Julia is upset with Augusta, of course, for framing Brick, but they spend the rest of the day talking about Lionel and Augusta. Julia says that Lionel will change his mind and come back, but then Augusta reveals, no, I'm the one who left, which Julia just finds bonkers. And the conversation comes around to where Augusta's going to live. She says, well, I considered going to Tahoe and moving in with Lakin. But now I think I should just move in with you. And Julia's not too happy about that because she's already, come to the conclusion that she's going to have to move out of the mansion if Augusta's not there. And later, when she does move out, Lionel says, you could stay.
Yeah.
But she says, no, Augusta's kind of counting on me. So I guess they are going to move in together. So that actually could be some fun. And
yeah,
Julia
that
will
could be kind of
have more scenes, and I guess it's almost a plot for Julia, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, she kind of
comes close.
She probably would have had one if Jack Lee had stayed on the show. That probably had an arc planned for Julia and Jack, and now the writers probably were like, well, we got to reposition Julia for something else. So hopefully they'll come up with something. I mean, the fact is, she stays on the show for the next 9 years. They must have figured out what to do with her eventually.
They need to get Julia, Warren, and Ted all living in an apartment together and sharing some kind of storyline. Yeah.
Lionel, on her way out, tells Julia to try and convince Augusta to come back. There's a very loud singer during a lot of these scenes at the Orient Express, and various people applaud at one point when she finishes a song. Augusta asks Warren, who's also in this episode, how Sophia and Lionel were when he found them. They were both out cold, says Warren. When they warmed up, how were they then? Says Augusta. Warren tries to get his parents together in the same room by calling Lionel and asking him to come over to the Orient Express immediately. But as luck would have it, Lionel walks in and spots Augusta just as Sophia also enters, and Augusta assumes they have come there together, or at least come to meet.
Now, I was thinking about this a little bit afterwards, and I was thinking, they're at the Orient Express, which is owned by Eden, who is Sophia's daughter. So how weird is it really for Sophia to be coming and going from there? Mm-hmm. And if you hated Sophia, why would you go there?
It's actually how the Lockridge just spent so much time at this Capwell restaurant.
Yeah.
But maybe it's one of those prestige things where, anyone goes there, and so it's kind of like, well, we kind of have to eat there. We're not going to go to the State Street Bistro and have the gossip papers say, that we're destitute because we're not eating at the Orient Express every day. I don't know if we've ever seen minks in the Orient Express.
No, I don't think we have yet. Anyway, I'm thinking the State Street Bistro must have been subject to a public health warning or something, because we never see it anymore, or La Mesa.
Well, La Mesa had a murder in it, but stayed fully in business for the next little while. Well, that was it for a Thursday episode. No Brick and no minks, but we'll find out if Brick finds out who his father is.
Yeah, I'm really interested. That's probably the plot that's interesting me the most right now.
Perhaps Channing's not really dead and he's been hypnotized into thinking he's Brick and had plastic surgery. Now that would be a Days of Our Lives plot.
That would be. And then if it turns out that someone's actually been wearing a rubber mask the entire time and they've been brought back from the dead.
It could be
by
Brick.
like a
Brick
magic.
could be Channing back from the grave.
Yeah.
We may find out after we watch episode 351, Friday, December 13th, 1985. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Lingerie. Must be Eads. Can't feature the Kirk wearing it. Not yet, anyway. You gonna stick one in the bedroom?
All I want to do, Mason, is whatever is best for Eden.
Taking over Capwell Enterprises from her. Relieving her of that onerous burden and those exhausting executive decisions.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 351 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Friday, December 13th, 1985. Is that my brother's birthday? I think so. Happy birthday, Renee. Janice's magazine hits the stands. The Orient Express bartender recognizes Janice from it when she comes in and shows the cover to Mason. He saunters over there and says, "Long time no see." This makes me wonder, maybe Mason could date Janice to make Mary jealous.
Mm-hmm.
Janice feels she might have made a mistake. Later at the Lockridge house, she tells Warren that she canceled another bikini photo shoot today because of all the attention she's been getting. Warren calls the job for her to say that she is willing to come in after all if they still want to do the shoot, because she's also a little worried that Nick's out of another job too. Janice ends up leaving a copy of the magazine on a table in the Lockridge living room, so I'm wondering if someone will find that in the next episode, either Lionel or Minx. Maybe Lionel could date Janice to make Augusta jealous.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of potential dates for Janice now that she and Dylan are pretty much definitely broken up.
Mm-hmm.
Janice feels that someone is following her. She sees someone in the bushes, and we later see Lionel coming in from through the French doors. But later, when she waits for Dylan at Sally's apartment, we see that there actually is someone who is spying on her and is also inside Sally's apartment building.
Yeah, and I was kind of wondering, because every time Janice appeared in this episode, she had this kind of creepy, sinister music.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a sense something was brewing for her.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, too, if you think about how we first met Janice, and she was in these little skimpy outfits and dancing very provocatively to Brazilian music. in this episode, she's actually more modestly dressed than I think we've ever seen her, including when she was a chauffeur. She's got this kind of overall thing on, and she's got Mary's haircut, and she's, and so I guess that's kind of a cue just how much she now feels like she needs to play down that part of herself, how exposed she feels.
It's interesting that she says people are recognizing her in the streets already, like the bartender did. So.
Yeah.
Augusta storms out of the Orient Express. Warren says to Janice he'll meet up with her later and follows Augusta to her room at the Capwell Hotel, apparently. She asks him, what did Lionel and Sophia look like when you found them? And he says that his head was on her shoulder. Dylan, Sam, and Pearl check out the oil rig. And it has a big sign in the back that says Capwell 1. So I don't know if the 1 means anything, but Capwell definitely means something. They realize they'll have to get Capwell permission. Sam wants Dylan to ask Kelly, but at first he doesn't want to. Eventually he agrees. And they do talk about the remodeling costs being $200,000 to $300,000. And Dylan talks about needing some investors. I'm somehow worried Kelly's going to get roped in as an investor. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility. I think we've got a few potential investors lined up.
Maybe Lionel wants to invest. Maybe Minx. Nick and Dylan check out Janice's pictorial. And then he and Sam tell Nick about the casino plan. Nick thinks it's a bad idea, as you might imagine, right from the beginning. He's upset that they want to involve Kelly. He thinks they just want Kelly to give them the oil platform for free. They, of course, tell him nothing of the sort. They want to rent it from the Capwells, etc. Nick and Dylan go over to Capwell to talk to Kelly. And they don't get past the front step. In fact, I don't think the camera even shoots from inside at them. I think they have a camera right up against the wall of the building, and Kirk actually opens the door to them and comes out a bit, blocking the door for this entire conversation. And Kirk hears out about half of Dylan's pitch and says, "We're not interested." And then he makes some derogatory comments about Dylan's appearance. And so Dylan contemplates getting a shave and a haircut to do a presentation to the Capwells if his initial meeting with Kelly goes well.
Yeah, and I kind of wondered what this might mean on various different levels, that Kirk is now making these business decisions on behalf of the Capwells. It also, because we know that Kirk has a fairly devious nature, made me wonder if he shut it down because he's suddenly seen the potential to sneak in and get in on that before they do.
That's another possibility. He's going to release the rig from the Capwells himself and then lease it back personally to Dylan maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, which I think would definitely cause a lot more tension in the Capwell family. If they then pitch it to Kelly, she's all on board as an investor, and it turns out that Kirk has sort of swept in and undercut them somehow, and Eden was off in whatever world she's in. I think that could really lead to a lot of disharmony. Maybe could even work in Mason's favor if that broke up Kelly's allegiance to Eden.
I'm kind of wondering what Mason's doing right now at Capwell, because they didn't make him chairman, so I don't think he has a lot of decision making. But I suspect he's reading through documents, trying to weasel his way into as much as he can.
Yeah.
There was a mention of the Walton deal again this sort of last episode, so I had forgotten at what stage that was. I thought it either had gone through or not, but I think Kirk needed Eden to sign some... Oh no, they had to go to a meeting for it, so maybe the merger is going ahead, but they need to finalize details. Lionel offers to drive Sophia home from the Orient Express. It appears that this happens before either of them has actually had a chance to eat anything. Well, Lionel was called there by Warren.
Yeah.
I think Sophia's intention was to have lunch there, but she's got a clean plate in front of her and a glass of water. So she tells Lionel that she thinks they should stay away from each other, and she doesn't even want the ride home from him. She said she'll call a cab. Running into Mason at the elevator, Mason wonders when she's going to move out of the guest house. And the elevator door opens, and Mary witnesses Sophia slapping Mason. And thinks that probably a lot of... we'll ask Mason later why she was slapping. He says, well, a lot of people want to slap me. Or did I get that reversed? Mason watches Mary and Mark on their date at the Orient Express. And later, he admonishes her for being 5 minutes late to work. And he asks her if she's serious about Mark. And she pretty much says, well, I don't want to get back with you because you're a liar. So, Mason tells Kirk that only Eden wants you here. And Kirk says, all I want is what's best for Eden. And Mason asks, let me guess, taking over Capwell Enterprises, relieving her of that exhausting burden? Kirk says, if that makes her happy.
It really struck me, actually, just going back a little bit, how in the course of just a couple episodes, we've gone from Mason saving Sophia and being kind of the hero to Sophia and Mason at each other again and again, bringing up how Sophia treated Mason's mother. So we're kind of back to normal with them.
I don't think it makes sense for Sophia to leave until Cece wakes up, really.
Yeah, no.
And then she has been visiting him, and Mason suggests that she's only spending time at Cece's bedside for the optics, so that she can get in good with Kelly and Ted and Eden, which is, of course, absurd.
And I think, too, that our hunch that perhaps Mary's seeing Mark to make Mason jealous as well is a possibility, because when you think about it, you know that your employer's son lives at a place, so why would you bring your date in?
Mark visits a lot.
Yeah, he visits a lot, when he could just leave her off at the end of the driveway sort of thing. So.
Yeah, Mark at the Orient Express tells Mason to stop bothering Mary. Sophia tells Cece about her time with Lionel in the cabin, and suddenly Cece jerks his arm away. Now, this is, of course, Charleston witness as the non-speaking comatose Cece, and she thinks that he actually, that it wasn't just an involuntary muscle response. And although she doesn't see it, later, after she talks to him, we see his right hand clench into a fist. So not only does he hear, but he seems to be as angry as ever at Sophia and Lionel. So I don't think being in a coma for 4 or 5 months is going to mellow Cece when he wakes up. I think he's going to leap up and chase Sophia off the property. Maybe she should get a place with Augusta.
Yeah.
Mason's already probably dealt with Gina. Where does Gina live then? She still lives there, right?
Yeah.
He kicked Brandon up, basically, but not Gina, which is an interesting reversal of it. After all these years of waiting to get Brandon, it's interesting we haven't actually seen Santana and Brandon together since the custody was granted. But I'd like to see some scenes in the Andrade house of Rosa and Danny, presumably. I know that they won't show Ruben, but they'll probably talk about him. Living there with the Andrades and see how he gets along with them. He doesn't really know they're his grandparents, so... Julia asks Lionel how could he let Augusta just walk out. And of course, Augusta's the one that walked out. A room service waiter hits on Augusta. Augusta just confirms with Julia that she still wants to get an apartment with her. And then Augusta kind of hand rings a bit in the mirror and says, please, somebody break a bottle of champagne over my bow. I'm about to launch a new life. And I'm scared to death. And she's talking about, I think, getting a job, too, in this episode, didn't she? So, and she wonders how she can ever love again. And Julia comes back with, maybe you could learn to love the waiter.
I think this would be a really kind of interesting direction for the show, because we have, earlier in the episode, Lionel basically saying he's really not going to chase after Augusta this time, like he has before. He's kind of ready to break that pattern.
And do you think that's just because Sophia's a potential there for him? Or?
It might be. I still think, he actually seems a little more perturbed by the thing with Brick than even Brick is.
Yeah,
So,
it's weird. I guess after so long of being spun around like a top by the Lockridges, it's just another thing that happened to him.
Yeah, so I think that did shake him up a bit, along with the Sophia thing. And it would be actually really interesting to see Augusta do some stuff on her own that isn't tied with this dysfunctional marriage with Lionel and her place with the Lockridges. It would be really neat to see what she and Julia get up to, maybe on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be neat to. They probably can't move into Sally's place like everyone else does, because who's living there right now? I mean, after is it Dylan that lives there? I guess Dylan lives there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they'll
It's not gonna be
repurpose
available for
the
long.
Santana apartment set or something like
Or
that.
maybe we'll see a new. Maybe Cruz will sell the beach house to them,
I was going to say maybe they'll end up in Cruz's boathouse.
or in the houseboat. Yeah. Or we'll get another set. We've had a lot of new sets lately. We had this. The smaller ones like the honeymoon hotel set and things. But we've had Buzz's place, and now we're going to have a new Augusta and Julia place, and we have the clinic recently built. So I guess, they must have. Oh, and we're going to see a casino. We had the casino set, which we saw. So, guess they're splurging on some sets for some upcoming storylines.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen Augusta's bedroom for months anyway, so
No,
there's space for Augusta's
exactly.
apartment.
And we haven't seen Lakin's bedroom, right?
Yeah, that's true, for a long time. That was it for this week. Anything else you want to talk about for week 72?
Not really. I think it'll be really interesting when Cece wakes up, and of course he'll wake up, we suspect, with a new look. And it'll be really interesting to see what he has heard and taken in, and maybe what he hasn't as well, because I doubt very much if he necessarily knows what actually happened with the plug pulling thing. He knows what Gina was contemplating, but did he take in the whole rigmarole with Kirk and Eden?
Well, we'll... if Cece does, wake up and say, "Oh, it wasn't Eden," will she just divorce Kirk immediately?
Yeah.
Monday, December 16th, so we've got the week before Christmas coming up. Looks like we're not going to see Brick again until Wednesday or Thursday, I think I looked ahead to see. But, he's going to start looking into his past a little bit, I think, if I remember correctly. I haven't really seen Minx since the fallout from the Augusta investigations. Although we did see her chauffeur bring Brick a gift, so I think maybe we don't see Minx again for a while either. But yeah, looking forward to seeing the casino thing go ahead and see how it looks all dolled up and whether it draws the crowd away from the Orient Express, maybe. I mean, you can't just zip out there for lunch. So.
I'll be interested to see if they try and have that whole thing set up for maybe February sweeps. Or for New Year's Eve, that would be perfect.
But New Year's at the casino.
Yeah.
Grand opening for New Year's Eve, maybe.
That would be pretty good.
Yeah. But I'll put my 50 cents on that, too, yeah. It's going to be a rapid week of getting things organized. I don't know. They still don't have the rights to it, so we'll see. And we'll probably see more of Pearl, which will be fun. We'll be back after we watched Monday's show for week 73, after we've seen episode 352 of Santa Barbara. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Or maybe a week. I think we might be starting to catch up around December 16th. See you.
Somebody please break a bottle of champagne over my bow. I'm about to launch a new life. Maybe you could learn to love the waiter.
How was Santa Rosa, huh?
We'll do it again.